My debit card was still warm from the base vending machine when my phone buzzed, and the caller ID read downtown storage. Then the manager said, "Ma'am, your stepfather is in the hallway with bolt cutters." And I stayed quiet so hard it felt like my ribs were holding their breath. I'm Greer, 31, and I'm an Army logistics officer. I move other people's chaos for a living. Pallets, manifests, deadlines. So when I tell you I wasn't surprised, I mean it the way you mean it after you've watched a storm form for months and finally heard the first crack of thunder. I didn't shout. I didn't panic. I didn't even ask him to stop Dawson. I just opened my desk drawer, touched the small brass key taped under the false bottom, and smiled like someone had finally walked into the trap exactly where it was set. Because the lock on that storage unit was never the point. The manager, Knox, lowered his voice like the walls could gossip. "He says it's his wife's now. He's demanding you authorize him. He's calm, ma'am, too calm." That was the first twist. I expected anger. I expected bluster. Dawson didn't come there acting scared or desperate. He came there acting entitled. "Do what we discussed," I told Knox. "Call security, call the police if he touches that lock, and document everything, every word." Knox hesitated. "You want me to let him keep talking?" "Yes," I said, still quiet. "Let him talk." I hung up and stared at the smudge on my uniform sleeve like it had answers. My pulse was steady, but my stomach felt cold. Not fear, not exactly. More like relief. When someone finally reaches for bolt cutters, they stop pretending their hands are clean. Hold on, tiny break. I read the comments when I'm worn out, and seeing your location reminds me I'm not telling these stories into an empty room. Like, subscribe and drop your city, state, or country and your first name. All right, now let me take you back. It started with a storage unit my mother never cared about. 10 by 10, climate controlled, wedged between a nail salon and a shipping warehouse downtown. The kind of place you drive past 100 times and never notice. My mother called it your dad's clutter box and once told me we should stop wasting money on it. I told her I'd handle it the next time I'd leave. I never did. Because my father, Harrison, didn't rent that unit for clutter. He rented it for control. He wasn't dramatic. He didn't do speeches. He didn't cry in front of people. He loved in quiet ways that looked like caution if you didn't know him. Receipts filed, copies made, names written in pen, not pencil. 2 years before he died, we sat on the back steps with mosquito repellent stinging our wrists, and he said, almost casually, "Some things shouldn't live in the house." I laughed, like what Dad, guns, gold bars, a secret family. He didn't laugh back. He just looked at the yard like he was reading it. "Like proof," he said. "Proof doesn't belong where feelings can touch it." At the time, I thought he was being paranoid. He'd been sick a long time. Hospitals do that to people. They make you see how fast life becomes paperwork. But when he died, the lawyer didn't give my mother the key. He gave it to me, and only when I was alone. Inside the envelope was one brass key and one page in my father's neat handwriting. Do not rush. Do not explain. If someone asks about the unit, write it down. If someone tries to access it without you, let them reveal themselves. No, I love you. No, take care of your mother. No dramatic last line. Just a plan that outlived his pulse. My mother met Dawson less than a year later. That was the second twist. I expected her to grieve longer, to be cautious, to move slowly. But grief makes people hungry. Not for love, always. Sometimes just for noise, for someone to fill the quiet so you don't have to hear your own thoughts. Dawson arrived with flowers and a smile that looked like it belonged in family photos. He fixed a leaky faucet. He told the neighbors he admired my service. He called my mother strong, the way men do when they want credit for noticing pain. When I met him in person, he shook my hand like he was sealing a deal. "Greer," he said, "your father must have been proud. Discipline like that doesn't come from nowhere." It sounded like a compliment. It was a probe. A week later, he asked, "Did Harrison leave a will?" Then, any retirement account still open? Then, was the house fully paid off? My mother laughed like it was harmless. Dawson worries, he's a planner. But planning doesn't sound like counting what isn't yours. And Dawson didn't just ask questions. He asked them in order. That's how I knew. Because in the army, the order of questions tells you the objective. The objective was help. The objective was access. I didn't confront him. I didn't warn my mother. I didn't even change my tone. I did something colder. I said okay, and I started documenting. Screenshots of texts where he framed control as concern. Emails he forwarded my mother about consolidating unused assets. A voice memo she accidentally sent me where I heard him in the background coaching her words, like she was reading lines off a script. Little things, the kind of things that look like nothing if you only see one. But if you stack them, they start to look like a staircase leading straight to your throat. Then Dawson asked about the storage unit. Not directly at first. He said, "Funny keeping a unit downtown. Storage isn't cheap." My mother answered for me. Harrison always did odd things. Dawson smiled. Smart though, keeping important stuff off-site. His eyes lingered on my mother when he said important, like he was already tasting a win. I said, "It's handled." He blinked. "Handled how?" "By me," I said, polite, calm, nothing to argue with. That's when his tone toward me changed. Not loud, not obvious, just sharpened. He started calling me rigid, said the military made me cold, said I couldn't let anyone in. And here's the third twist. My mother started repeating it. Not because she believed it at first, but because he said it so often it began to feel like a fact that was always true and she just never noticed. "Dawson thinks you don't trust family," she said once, careful, like she was testing how dangerous the sentence was. I smiled into the phone. "I trust patterns," I told her, "and patterns don't need titles." I didn't tell her I'd already gone to the storage facility months earlier and tightened the rules. Only my name on file. Only my ID. No spouse, no mother, no, but I'm family. Knox, the manager, was old school, the kind of man who didn't enjoy drama and didn't forget a face. When I told him, "If anyone tries to access my unit without me, call me," he stared at me for a long moment and said, "That sounds like someone already did." I didn't answer. I just slid a second contact number across the counter and said, "If it happens, I want it documented." He nodded like he'd seen this movie before. And Dawson kept escalating. He offered to drive downtown for me. He said, "You're busy, Greer. Let me take something off your plate." He used the sweetest voice he could find. When I refused, he got quieter about it. But he got busier in other places. My mother's phone started going unanswered when I called. Mail stopped being forwarded. When I asked my mother why she sounded nervous, she said, "Dawson thinks it's better if we don't talk finances. It upsets you." It didn't upset me. It thrilled him. Because isolation doesn't begin with distance. It begins with doubt. And then, the day of the call, Knox said the words I'd been waiting for. Bolt cutters. I sat on my bunk after drill, boots still on, uniform still tight at the collar, and I held that little brass key like it was heavier than metal should be. I didn't drive home immediately. I didn't race to save the lock. Because if I stopped Dawson, he'd stay charming, he'd stay deniable, he'd stay clean. But if I let him try, he'd finally get dirty in a way he couldn't scrub off. That was my father's entire point. And as the base went into evening routine, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Dawson said you're trying to keep me from what Harrison left us." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I typed one line. "What exactly did he say Harrison left you?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. And then my mother replied, with the sentence that made my blood go colder than Knox's call ever could. "He said the storage unit is probably where you hid the real money." I read that message twice, then a third time, like the words might soften if I stared long enough. Hid the real money. That was Dawson's story now. Not concern, not responsibility, not helping my mother through grief. Money, hidden, stolen, stashed away by the cold. Rigid daughter in uniform. And the ugly part was how quickly my mother repeated it, like the idea had been sitting in her mouth for days, waiting for permission to come out. I didn't text back right away. Silence is the only language people like Dawson underestimate. They mistake it for weakness. They assume no reply means no plan. So I did what I always do when something turns tactical. I started stacking facts. First, I called my father's attorney, Vivian, the one person my dad trusted to keep her face still while other people panicked. She answered on the second ring, and I could hear paper shuffling, the calm sound of someone who spends her life cleaning up other people's messes. I said, Dawson tried to break into the storage unit. Vivian did not gasp. She did not ask why. She did not ask if I was sure. She said, do you have documentation? Not yet, I said, but the manager does. Security footage, incident report. Good, she said. Do not warn him. Do not confront him alone. And do not hand your mother any documents until we control the sequence. Control the sequence. My father used to say the same thing about supply lines. It is not enough to have what you need. You have to deliver it in the right order or it gets lost. Vivian told me to request leave, fly home, and meet her before I stepped into that house. Then she said something that made my throat tighten. Your father updated his files 6 months before he died, Greer. He added a separate memo. He used the words future spouse more than once. I stared at the wall of my barracks room, feeling my heartbeat shift from steady to sharp. He knew, I whispered. Vivian's voice stayed level. He suspected. He prepared. He did not want you to fight a war with feelings. He wanted you to fight it with paper. When I hung up, my phone buzzed again. My mother. Dawson says you forged the storage paperwork. He says you always hated him. I could picture her sitting at the kitchen table, shoulders rounded, eyes tired, Dawson somewhere behind her, feeding her lines like vitamins. I typed slowly. I do not hate him. I do not trust him. Then I put my phone face down and opened my private log, the one I kept in a locked folder with backups in 2 places. Date, time, exact wording. Hid the real money. Forged paperwork. Always hated him. He was building a narrative staircase, 1 step at a time, trying to walk my mother upward until she could not see the ground anymore. So I gave him what he wanted. I gave him space. I requested emergency leave. I packed light. I kept my uniform pressed, not for pride, but because people like Dawson behave differently when they are reminded you belong to systems bigger than their charm. On the flight home, I stared out the window at cloud tops like white dunes, and I replayed every conversation with Dawson from the beginning. The compliments that were actually questions. The jokes that were actually probes. The little sighs when I refused him, like I had inconvenienced him by having boundaries. I remembered one moment I had dismissed at the time. It was right after the wedding, during a video call. My mother had turned the camera to show him hanging framed photos in the hallway. He held up one of my parents, my father smiling in the sun, my mother's hair blown across her cheek. Dawson looked at it and said, Harrison was the kind of man who hid things in plain sight. I had laughed politely. Now my stomach tightened, because that sentence was not about admiration. It was about strategy. When I landed, I didn't go home first. I went straight to Vivian's office. She met me in the lobby with a folder already in her hand, and when she hugged me, it was brief and firm, like she was reminding me I was not alone. She sat me down, slid documents across the table, and said, Your father created a trust before he married your mother. It separates his assets. It names you as executor. It specifically excludes future spouses from claims. She let the words land. Then she added, But Dawson does not need legal rights to cause harm. He only needs your mother to believe he has them. I nodded. That was exactly what he'd been working on. Vivian tapped a page with her pen. This is your father's memo, the one he added 6 months before he died. He noted Dawson by name. My eyes snapped up, by name. Vivian watched me carefully, then turned the page so I could read. My father's handwriting, steady and clean, like he was writing a grocery list. Dawson has asked Marin about accounts twice. He frames it as concern. He asks in sequences. He watches for weakness. He compliments service to disarm Greer. He is patient. I swallowed. My father had never met Dawson in person. Or so I thought. Vivian said, there is more. Your father met him once briefly before your mother married him. He did not tell her. I felt heat climb my neck. When? Vivian slid the next sheet toward me. A date, a location. The funeral home. My father wrote that Dawson approached him after a service for a mutual acquaintance, shook his hand, and asked how long the house had been paid off. My father wrote that he smiled, answered vaguely, then went home and rented the storage unit. The room went very quiet, not because I was afraid, but because the timeline snapped into place so cleanly it almost hurt. This wasn't bad luck. This was a man who had been circling my family long before my mother ever called him charming. Vivian's voice softened, just a little. Your father did not want you to hate your mother for choosing him. He wanted you to understand she was targeted. Targeted? That word settled in my chest like a stone. Vivian made copies of everything, notarized what needed to be notarized, and told me to keep the originals out of the house until the moment I was ready to use them. Then she said, go to the storage facility now. Get the footage. Get the incident report. Do not go to your mother's house until you have that in hand. So I did. Knox looked relieved when he saw me, like he had been carrying this story alone and was glad to hand it back to its rightful owner. He didn't smile. He didn't make small talk. He said he came back twice after the bolt cutters. Twice. That was the first micro twist of the day. I expected one attempt. I expected him to retreat and regroup. Instead, he returned, calmer, dressed cleaner, holding papers. Knox handed me copies, a printed marriage certificate, a handwritten note from my mother that was not in her handwriting, a fake authorization letter with my name misspelled. My name had never been misspelled by anyone who knew me. Knox said he told me locks do not protect what belongs to him. They just delay it. I didn't react. I just asked for the footage. Knox pulled up the video on his monitor. There was Dawson walking down the hallway like he owned it. Tool bag, bolt cutters, no hesitation. He argued with Knox for several minutes. When Knox refused, Dawson smiled, stepped back, and waited. Then he looked straight into the camera. Not accidentally, not glancing. He stared into it like a warning. That was the second micro twist. People like Dawson usually avoid cameras. They prefer shadows. But Dawson wanted to be seen. He wanted me to know. He was willing to cross lines. He wanted me to feel hunted. I took a slow breath, because intimidation only works if you accept the emotion it offers you. I asked Knox, did he touch the lock? Knox nodded. He lifted the bolt cutters, tested the angle, then stopped when security stepped into the hallway. Police arrived. Dawson turned polite instantly. He called it a family misunderstanding. He said he was protecting his wife. Then he left. And that would have been enough. Except Knox leaned closer and said, one more thing. After he left, he sat in his car in the lot for 40 minutes, just watching the office. 40 minutes. That was not concern. That was control. I collected the incident report, requested the footage file, and had Knox email it directly to Vivian too. Then I sat in my car for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, feeling something I didn't want to admit. Not fear. Not anger. Protective rage. The kind that shows up late, once you realize someone didn't just try to steal money. They tried to rewrite your mother's reality. I drove to the house. The porch light was on even though it was daylight, like someone had turned it on out of habit and forgotten. When I walked inside, the air felt tight, too still, too arranged. My mother stood in the living room, holding a dish towel she wasn't using, twisting it in her hands like she needed something to hold onto. Dawson was at the kitchen table with my father's old checkbook register open in front of him, the one my mother kept out of nostalgia more than use. He looked up like he'd been waiting for the door. "Well," he said, "there she is." My mother's eyes searched my face. Relief and dread tangled together. "You didn't tell me you were coming," she said. "I needed to see you in person," I said. Dawson's smile was thin. "We have been trying to reach you. Your mother has been worried." My mother flinched at the word, because it was his favorite weapon. I said, "I spoke to Vivian." Dawson's eyes flickered, just a flicker, but it was there. That was the third micro twist. He knew the lawyer's name. My mother didn't mention Vivian to him. She wouldn't even remember it. So how did he know? Because he'd been paying attention to my father's world for longer than I understood. Dawson leaned back. "We just want transparency." I looked at my mother, not him. "Did you tell him about the storage unit?" My mother's mouth opened, then closed. Dawson answered for her. "She told me enough," he said, "that there is a unit, that you refuse to let anyone see what is inside, that you have been secretive since Harrison died." My mother whispered, "Dawson thinks it is unhealthy." He framed it as her thought, but I could hear his fingerprints on every syllable. I took my phone out and placed it on the table. I did not raise my voice. I said, "Dawson, you went to the storage facility with bolt cutters." My mother inhaled sharply, hand flying to her mouth. Dawson laughed once, fast and sharp. "That is absurd. You are making things up." I tapped the screen and turned it toward them. The still image froze him in the hallway, bolt cutters visible, his posture angled toward the lock. My mother stared at it, her face draining in real time. "That is you," she whispered. Dawson's charm slipped, not all the way but enough. He spoke quickly, too quickly. "I brought tools because the manager was being difficult. I did not break anything. I was trying to protect your assets. Your daughter is hiding something." He pointed at me like I was the criminal. I turned to my mother. "Did he tell you he went there?" She shook her head slowly, as if her neck had forgotten how to move. Dawson said, "I did not want to stress you. I handled it, like a husband should." My mother's eyes filled. "You handled it behind my back." He reached for her hand. She pulled away. That small motion was louder than any argument. Dawson's gaze snapped to me, cold now. "You think this is power?" I kept my face calm. "I think it is proof." He stood, chair scraping. "You are doing this because you want control. Military made you like this. You always need to win." I watched him, and I realized something with a strange clarity. He was not angry because he'd been caught. He was angry because he had expected my mother to defend him. Because his whole plan depended on her making his lies safe. My mother's voice shook. "Why would you bring bolt cutters?" Dawson's jaw tightened. "Because people like you get taken advantage of, Marin. Someone had to be responsible." He said, "People like you." "Not us. Not family. People like you." And my mother heard it too, because she blinked as if a curtain had moved. That was when the doorbell rang. All three of us froze. Dawson's head turned toward the door first, like his body knew before his mind did. I walked to the door, opened it, and saw an officer on the porch. Behind him stood Knox, hands clasped in front of him, face grave. The officer spoke politely. "Ma'am, we received a report regarding an attempted forced entry at a commercial storage facility. We need to ask some questions." Dawson stepped into view, shoulders squaring like he could posture his way out of consequence. "This is a family misunderstanding," he said. "She is exaggerating." The officer's eyes stayed steady. "Sir, I need you to step outside." My mother's voice rose behind me, thin but firm. "Dawson, do it." He turned to her, shock flashing across his face like he couldn't believe the script had changed. You are taking her side. My mother swallowed. I am taking the side of truth. For a split second, Dawson's mask dropped completely. And in that brief naked moment, I saw what my father had seen. Not love, not partnership. A man who chose targets, and then acted surprised when they bled. He hesitated on the threshold, like the porch light had turned into a spotlight. The officer didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Authority is quiet when it's real. Dawson tried to smile again, but it came out crooked. I'm her husband, he said, nodding toward my mother. This is being blown out of proportion. The officer looked past him into the living room. Ma'am, he asked my mother, is this man authorized to access that unit? My mother's throat worked like she was swallowing something sharp. Her eyes flicked to me, then to the still image on the phone, then back to Dawson. And I watched the exact moment she realized that answering honestly would change her life. She whispered, no. Dawson's head snapped toward her. Morgan. That name, the real one, the one he used only when he needed her to remember her role in his story. The officer's voice stayed even. Sir, step outside. Dawson lifted his hands slowly, like he was performing calm. Of course, he said, too smooth. I'm cooperating. He walked out, shoulders stiff, and the officer followed. Knox stayed at the door for a moment, his face apologetic, like he hated being part of any family's collapse. Then he turned and left too. The door shut, and the house exhaled. My mother stood in the middle of the living room, dish towels still twisted in her fists, staring at the spot where Dawson had been like, she expected him to materialize again with a better excuse. She didn't cry, not yet. She asked, very softly, how long have you been waiting for this? I didn't lie, since the first time he asked about Dad's accounts. Her shoulders sagged. I thought you were just being difficult. That sentence hit harder than I expected, not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. It was exactly what Dawson had been feeding her, and she had been repeating it because repeating it was easier than admitting she might have chosen wrong. I sat on the edge of the coffee table, keeping my posture relaxed on purpose. If I moved too fast, if I pushed too hard, she'd shut down. Not because she didn't love me, because shame is a lock too. I didn't want to embarrass you, I said. I wanted you safe. She stared at the trust documents Vivian had helped me bring, still sealed in my bag. Safe from what? She asked, and the question was raw. From him turning this into a fight, I said. He's good at fights. He's been practicing. I'm better at proof. My mother finally sank into the armchair like her legs had given out. She looked around the room, the familiar walls, the photo frames, the couch where she'd sat beside Dawson watching television like it was normal life. Then she said something that made my chest tighten. He changed the way the house feels, she whispered. I just kept telling myself it was grief. It can be both, I said, but grief doesn't isolate you, people do. Outside, I heard Dawson's voice rise, then drop, then rise again, sharper. The officer said something back, quieter. The dynamic shifted in real time. I didn't need to see it to understand it. Control had left the room. My mother rubbed her forehead. What happens now? She asked. I reached into my bag and set the folder on the table, but I didn't open it yet. I made her meet my eyes first. Now, I said, you get to hear the truth in the right order. Her chin trembled. She nodded once. I opened the folder and slid out the first document. The trust, dates, signatures, filing confirmation. The kind of boring paper that feels like a weapon when someone has been trying to rewrite your life. My mother read the header, then the next line, then the clause that mattered. She flinched at the words excluding future spouse. Her voice broke. He did this before I even met Dawson. Dad rented the unit before he got sick, I said. Before anything happened that would make this look like revenge. My mother's eyes filled, but she still didn't cry. She kept reading like a woman trying to wake herself up. Then I slid out the will, the most recent one, the one Vivian had flagged. My mother's mouth opened slightly when she saw the date. 6 months before, she whispered. Yeah, I said. He updated it when he realized someone was circling. My mother swallowed, but how could he know he never met him? I didn't answer immediately because this was the part that would sting, the part that might make her angry at my father for not telling her. So I said it carefully. He did meet him, once, after a funeral. Dad didn't tell you because he didn't want you to think he was controlling you. He wanted you to choose freely. He just wanted you protected if someone used your loneliness. My mother stared at the papers like they were rearranging her memories. Then she said, Dawson asked me about the house being paid off. On our third date. My stomach turned. What did you say? She looked ashamed. I told him I didn't think it mattered. I nodded slowly, keeping my face neutral. Shame is gasoline. Dawson had already poured enough of it on her. I wasn't going to add a match. It mattered to him, I said, not to you. My mother's fingers tightened on the pages until her knuckles went pale. He kept calling it our assets, she whispered, even before we got married. I let that sit. Then I pulled out the still image and set it in front of her again, next to the trust clause. 2 different kinds of truth. One legal, one visual. Both undeniable. My mother finally made a sound that wasn't a word, just a broken exhale that sounded like a dam cracking. Tears started then, silently, slipping down her cheeks without drama, like her body was mourning and her pride was trying not to be seen. I feel stupid, she said. You're not stupid, I replied. You were targeted. She shook her head. I should have listened to you. I reached across the table, placed my hand over hers, and said the thing I needed her to hear more than any document. You're listening now. Another knock sounded at the door, not the doorbell this time. Knuckles, firm, controlled. I stood, opened it, and the officer was back, alone. Ma'am, he said, I issued him a trespass notice for the storage facility. He's been advised that returning could result in arrest. I also recommend you file a protective order if you feel threatened. My mother appeared behind me, wiping her face quickly like she was embarrassed to be human in front of a stranger. The officer glanced at her and softened his tone. Ma'am, do you want him back in the home tonight? My mother's lips parted, hesitated. Dawson had built himself into this house like a piece of furniture. Removing him felt impossible because he'd made it feel rude. Then my mother straightened. No, she said, voice shaking but clear. I don't. The officer nodded. He's gathering a few belongings from his vehicle. I'll remain nearby while he leaves. If he contacts you again, document it. Document it. My father's phrase, now coming from a uniformed stranger on my porch. The officer left. The door shut. My mother leaned against the wall like she had used up all her strength on that one word. No. I helped her sit down again. Then I made the second call. Vivian answered immediately, like she'd been waiting with her pen already uncapped. He showed up with bolt cutters, I said. We have footage. Police came to the house. My mother doesn't want him back tonight. Vivian's voice went crisp. Good, next steps. Tonight, change every password. Tomorrow, freeze credit. Get a new bank card. Remove him from any shared accounts. I will draft a protective order request and a notice. Do not meet him alone. Do not argue, only paper. My mother listened, face tight, as Vivian's calm voice rebuilt boundaries brick by brick. When I hung up, my mother stared at the trust again and whispered, He lied to my face. Yes, I said. About everything. Yes. She looked up at me, eyes wet. What's in the storage unit? I held the question for a beat because this was the moment I'd been saving, the moment my father had engineered. The context, I said, the reasons and one letter for you. Her breath hitched. A letter. I nodded. He told me to show it to you only when you were ready. My mother's hands trembled. Am I ready? I didn't answer with comfort. I answered with truth. You already told the officer no. That means you are. She swallowed. Then she whispered, okay. That one word, quiet and real, felt bigger than anything Dawson had ever said in this house. We drove downtown together, but I didn't take her into the facility lobby. I had Knox meet us at a side door so we wouldn't have to cross paths with anyone. The hallway was cold, the air smelling faintly like dust and metal, and my mother walked slowly like each step was a confession. When we reached the unit, she stopped in front of the door and stared at the plain roll-up metal. "This is just a box," she said, voice cracked. "It's a box that holds truth," I replied. I unlocked it. The door lifted smoothly, revealing the same neat stacks of labeled boxes, the same unremarkable clutter. My mother looked disappointed for half a second. Then she saw the handwriting. Harrison's careful, familiar script. And her face changed. "Oh," she breathed, "this is him." I moved 2 boxes aside, reached for the matte gray cabinet bolted to the floor, and opened it with the brass key. Inside, everything was arranged like a plan, not a secret. Trust documents, copies, memos, notes, a small folder labeled "Read First." I pulled out the envelope with my mother's name on it and held it out. She didn't take it at first. She just stared like she was afraid of what it might confirm. Then she reached for it with both hands and pressed it against her chest for a moment before opening it. She read silently, lips moving slightly. Her breathing slowed. Tears slipped down again, but this time they weren't confusion. They were recognition. Halfway through, she made a sound like she'd been punched gently in the heart. At the end, she looked up at me and whispered, "He knew I'd be lonely." I nodded. "He didn't blame you for it." My mother's voice shook. "He warned me." "Yes." She wiped her face and kept reading the last lines like she was absorbing medicine. Then she folded the letter carefully and said, "I feel like I'm meeting him again." I didn't answer because my throat was tight. Back at the house that night, Dawson didn't come to the door. He didn't bang on windows. He didn't make a scene for the neighbors. He did something smaller and meaner. At 11:43 p.m., my mother's phone buzzed with a text. "You just let your daughter destroy your life." My mother stared at the screen, her thumb hovering like she wanted to reply with rage or apology or both. I touched her wrist gently. "Don't feed him," I said. She swallowed, then handed the phone to me without a word. I took a screenshot, logged the time, saved it, then I blocked the number. My mother watched me do it, and something shifted in her expression, subtle but important. Like she was realizing that silence wasn't abandonment. It was strategy. The next morning, Vivian's office sent the paperwork. We signed, we filed, banks froze access, passwords changed, accounts secured. My mother made calls with a steadiness that surprised even her. Around noon, a fraud alert pinged her email. Someone had tried to open a credit line in her name. I didn't have to guess who. That was the final twist, and it was perfect because it proved the same thing in a new way. Dawson wasn't just greedy. He was desperate enough to commit crimes when charm stopped working. Vivian arranged for the report to be forwarded to the same officer who'd come to the house, tied to the trespass notice already on record. My mother stared at the fraud alert, then at me, and the shame in her eyes hardened into something else. "Resolve." She whispered, "He would have ruined me." "He tried," I said. "He just didn't expect you to wake up before he finished." That evening, my mother cooked soup like she was rebuilding normal with her hands. We ate at the kitchen table where Dawson had once spread paperwork like a king laying claim to land. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my fingers. "I'm sorry," she said, "for doubting you." I squeezed back. "You're here now." She nodded, eyes bright but steady. "Your father didn't leave me money," she whispered. "He left me a way out." "Yes," I said, "and you took it." Later, when I packed to return to base, my mother stood in the doorway of my old room, the letter folded in her hands like a compass. "I thought your silence meant you didn't need me," she said. I held her gaze. "My silence meant I was protecting you, even when you couldn't see it." She stepped forward and hugged me tightly, the kind of hug that feels like an apology and a promise at the same time. When I drove away at dawn, the porch light was off for the first time in months. And the house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt owned.